You are from Colombia. You immigrated to America. And the reason why you came onto our show last year was to talk about your book, America Let Me In, a choose your own immigration story, which I've now listened to twice. It is a phenomenal book. It is so funny, but it's also so meticulous in the journey, not just the immigration journey, but the immigration journey for this person and the immigration journey for that person, having to do with your status. Can you talk more about, what led you to, to talk about your own immigration story is wonderful, but to do what you did, which was to really do some hardcore research into it, what led you to say, I want to write this book instead of the typical memoir?
I have always thought that my life is not that interesting. So I was like, I don't want to just write a memoir because that's not that interesting. Like Malala should write a memoir, and she did. But, that's the people whose memoirs I would read and I would be interested in. And I was like, I have overcome some kind of difficulty, but, I'm not going to compare myself to anyone who actually has had to overcome things in life and has had a story that is good and everyone should know about. And so what I was interested in was the fact that I think the most interesting thing about my life, especially as an immigrant in the States, was that I had to explain to my very well-meaning, mostly liberal friends in New York, like Bernie voters, kind of like in 2016, that the entire premise of their immigration system, when Trump was going out there and being like, they're not sending their best, people were like, well, they should just do this. And I was like, well, they can't, there's no right way to come to America. And also Bernie at the time in 2016 was talking about getting rid of the H-1B program, but not suggesting the H-1B visa, which is the normal work visa, but not suggesting an alternative, while he was campaigning. I was like, what are we doing? What is Trump is saying this in one end of the political spectrum, Bernie is saying this on the other end of the political spectrum, and everyone has an opinion on immigration, but no one knows what they're talking about, and so to me that was like a dominant thought basically since I moved to the States. And so when it came to writing the book, I was like, well, how can I write a story that actually makes me laugh, but actually informs people of their own immigration system? And so I found this kind of like multiple paths kind of form where I could create multiple characters living different kinds of visas and different kinds of immigration journeys. And that's how we did it. That's how I ended up going into this.
It really is great, folks. I honestly say get the audiobook. The audiobook is fantastic. All I'll say is The Lawyer. That's all I'll say. You'll know when you listen. So,
our guest is Felipe Torres Medina. He is the author of America Let Me In, a choose your immigration story, and he is a writer, a former writer for the Stephen Colbert, or the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Let's talk about the writing process, if you don't mind, Felipe. We were talking about this breakneck pace of jokes and monologue jokes and sketches, and then you write a book, which is a lot more, I would assume, tedious, or maybe something you just weren't used to writing. What was more fulfilling and what was more fun in terms of writing for you?
I think they were both incredibly fulfilling. I think the biggest thing that late night writing does for a writer is just speed and the ability to just write and throw jokes away and kill your darlings and be like, this joke was good, but it's not good enough. All right. Or it's not for today. Goodbye. And I used a lot of that muscle and those skills when writing the book, because in the end, the book was following the same format as like a show like ours did, which was you get a data point and then you find a way to, and jokeify, right? To say something funny out of that. Now I added a layer of comedy and stories to frame all these data points, but a lot of the book, there's certain parts of the book that are just like explainers on different kinds of visas when I'm not telling a story. And those were just like, that's the same mechanism I did to write monologue jokes for the show. Here's a data point, then a joke. Here's a data point, then a joke. And so in that sense, it was very similar. The thing that was crazy is how much slower the pace of publishing is. And so I remember being like, okay, well, I guess I wrote this joke and now I have to wait for my editor to read it. And, it'll be 3-4 weeks. And that's fine. Like, I wasn't expecting them to read it faster. They had other projects to work on, but it was like, but why isn't one of the funniest people alive, Stephen Colbert, telling me that this joke works 40 minutes after I wrote it? Like this makes no sense.
That's great.
That's amazing. The breakneck versus the page, it's got to be a very weird place to go. And I don't want to, we don't have enough time anyways, but I'm not going to ask the question, so what's next? Because I'm sure you're just getting yourself in a place of making those next moves. But I'll tell you what, when you're doing something next, when something comes up, you got a new gig, whether it's a book, a show, whatever, please come back and talk to us about that, because it's always great to talk to you. And I really look forward to seeing what you do in the future, Felipe.
I would love to come back, and thanks so much for those nice words.
Of course. Felipe Torres Medina is a humorist, a writer, author of America Let Me In, a choose your immigration story. He has been our guest this evening. We're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we're going to go into the nightcap, wrap things up about our thoughts, as well as your text messages on our question, what is the natural disaster that scares you the most? But you stick right here, because you are listening and are watching Nightlight with Pete Schwabba and Greg Bach here on the Civic Media Network.